don't move a muscle. This is the story of a woman who walked into a lion's den to save a dying soul, only to find herself hunted by the king of the underworld. One wrong look, one soft word, and her life would never be the same. Subscribe right now and watch until the very last second, because the final moment of this story will change everything you think you know about love. Nia was a nurse who lived in a small apartment and worked double shifts just to pay her bills. She was known for having hands that could heal and a heart that never quit on anyone. One night, a black car pulled up to her door and two men in expensive suits told her she was needed for a private job. They offered her more money in 1 month than she made in 3 years. She didn't want to go, but they told her an old woman was dying and no one else could help. Nia packed her bag and followed them into the dark night. They drove her to a massive stone house hidden behind giant iron gates and tall trees. Inside, the house felt cold and empty, like a museum where no one was allowed to laugh. Nia was led to a bedroom where an elderly woman named Mrs. Moretti lay gasping for air. The doctors had given up, but Nia saw a spark of life left in the woman's tired eyes. She immediately began to work, cleaning the room and speaking softly to the woman. She didn't care about the wealth or the guards outside the door. For 3 days, Nia never left the bedside of the old woman. She sang old songs and told stories about her own grandmother while she administered medicine. The guards watched her through the cameras, surprised that she wasn't afraid of the silence. On the 4th night, the heavy doors of the bedroom swung open with a loud thud. A tall man with scars on his hands and eyes like ice walked into the room. This was Dante, the man everyone feared, the boss who controlled the whole city. Dante stopped in his tracks when he saw Nia holding his mother's hand. He had expected a nervous doctor, but instead, he saw a woman who looked like she belonged in a different world. Nia didn't jump or scream. She just looked at him and told him to be quiet because his mother was finally sleeping. Dante felt a strange jolt in his chest that he hadn't felt in years. He was a man who took whatever he wanted, but he found he couldn't even find his voice. He watched the way the lamplight hit her skin and felt a sudden deep ache. Nia stood up and walked over to him, looking him right in the eye. She told him that his mother needed love more than she needed expensive machines. Dante looked down at her, his jaw tight and his heart racing. He was used to people trembling when he entered a room, but Nia just looked tired and determined. He realized in that moment that she was the most beautiful thing he had ever seen. He wanted to tell her to leave for her own safety, but he knew he could never let her go now. The next morning, Nia found a bouquet of rare flowers on the kitchen table with no note. She knew they were from him, even though he was a man of violence and blood. She began to see Dante watching her from the shadows of the hallways. He didn't speak much, but he made sure she had the best food and the softest blankets. The guards started treating Nia like a queen because they saw how the boss looked at her. It was a dangerous kind of look, filled with a hunger that scared them. By the end of the first week, Mrs. Moretti woke up and spoke her first words in months. She called Nia her angel and reached out to touch her face. Dante was standing in the doorway, watching his mother return from the brink of death. He realized that Nia hadn't just saved his mother, she was starting to save him too. But he had many enemies, and bringing a good woman into his house was like putting a target on her back. He swore to himself that he would destroy anyone who tried to hurt her. Dante started joining Nia for dinner every night, even though they sat at opposite ends of a long table. He asked her about her life, and she told him about her dream of opening a clinic for people who couldn't afford care. He listened to every word like it was the most important thing in the world. He stopped going to his meetings, just so he could spend an extra hour watching her read in the library. His men started to whisper that the boss was getting soft, which made the atmosphere in the house tense. One afternoon, a rival gang sent a gift to the front gate, a box with a warning inside. Dante's face turned to stone, and he immediately ordered the house to be put on lockdown. Nia was confused when the windows were covered with steel shutters and the guards picked up heavy rifles. She found Dante in his office, cleaning a silver pistol with a look of pure hatred. She walked up to him and took the gun out of his hands, setting it on the desk. She told him that blood only leads to more blood. Dante grabbed her wrist not to hurt her, but because he was desperate for her to understand. He told her that his world didn't have room for kindness, and that he had to be a monster to keep her safe. Nia didn't flinch. She leaned in and told him that he wasn't a monster to her. The tension between them was so thick it felt like the air was vibrating. Dante let go of her hand and turned away, afraid that if he kissed her, he would never be able to do his job again. The house remained under siege for 3 days, with Nia and Dante trapped together inside the walls. They spent the nights talking by the fireplace, sharing secrets that Dante had never told a soul. He told her about the father who beat him and the brothers he had lost to the streets. Nia cried for the boy he used to be, and Dante felt his cold heart beginning to melt. He started to realize that he didn't want the power or the money anymore if it meant he couldn't have a normal life with her. One night, a power line was cut and the house went pitch black. Nia was in the kitchen getting water when she heard a window break in the distance. She froze as she heard footsteps that didn't sound like the guards. Suddenly, a strong arm wrapped around her waist and a hand covered her mouth. It was Dante. He whispered in her ear to stay silent and led her into a secret room behind a bookshelf. He stood in front of her with 2 knives, ready to die to protect her. The intruders were caught by the security team before they reached the living quarters, but the scare changed everything. Dante realized that his enemies knew Nia was his weakness. He told her the next morning that he was sending her away to a safe house in the mountains. Nia refused to go, saying she wouldn't leave Mrs. Moretti or him. They had a huge argument that ended with Dante pinning her against the wall, his face inches from hers. He told her she was the only thing he cared about. Nia reached up and touched the scar on his cheek, telling him she wasn't afraid of his enemies. Dante finally broke and kissed her, a long, desperate kiss that tasted like years of loneliness. It wasn't a gentle kiss. It was a promise that he would move heaven and earth to keep her. But as they pulled apart, they heard a scream coming from his mother's room. They ran down the hall to find Mrs. Moretti holding a letter that had been slipped under her door. The war had officially begun. The letter was a ransom note for a cousin Dante hadn't seen in years, but the message was clear. Leave the city or everyone you love dies. Dante knew he had to strike back hard, but he was terrified of leaving Nia alone. He decided to move her and his mother to a secret bunker beneath the house. Nia hated the cold, concrete walls, but she knew it was the only way to stay alive. She spent her hours teaching Mrs. Moretti how to knit, trying to keep their spirits up while the world above them exploded. Dante disappeared for 2 days to handle the threat. When he returned, he was covered in bruises and his shirt was torn. Nia didn't ask questions. She simply got her medical kit and started cleaning his wounds. She worked in silence, her eyes filled with tears because she hated seeing him hurt. Dante watched her, feeling a deep sense of guilt for bringing her into his mess. He realized that no matter how much money he had, he couldn't buy her a peaceful life as long as he was the boss. During his recovery, one of Dante's top lieutenants, a man named Marco, started acting strange. Nia noticed Marco watching her with a look that wasn't respectful. It was greedy. She told Dante about it, but Dante didn't want to believe his best friend would betray him. He told Nia she was just stressed, which caused the first real crack in their relationship. Nia felt alone in the bunker, wondering if she had made a mistake by falling for a man who lived by the sword. A week later, the bunker's security system was bypassed from the inside. Nia was sleeping when she heard the heavy steel door creak open. She saw Marco standing there with a group of men she didn't recognize. He told her that Dante was dead and that she belonged to him now. Nia didn't believe him for a second. She grabbed a heavy glass vase and smashed it over the head of the man closest to her, then ran toward the back exit. She was faster than they expected, fueled by pure terror. She managed to hide in the ventilation shafts, crawling through the dust and heat. She could hear the men shouting her name, promising to hurt her if she didn't come out. She realized then that Dante wasn't dead. If he were, they wouldn't be looking for her. They would be celebrating. She had to find a way to get a message to him. She found a phone line in the maintenance closet and used her knowledge of the house's wiring to trigger the silent alarm in Dante's private office. Miles away, Dante was at a meeting when his watch vibrated with the emergency signal. He knew instantly that Nia was in trouble. He didn't say a word to the other bosses. He simply stood up and walked out, his men following him with guns drawn. He drove back to the house like a madman, crashing through his own front gates. He didn't care about the rules of the Mafia anymore. He only cared about the woman who had shown him what it felt like to be human. He burst into the bunker just as Marco found Nia's hiding spot. The showdown was short and violent. Dante didn't hesitate. He took down the men who had dared to touch his home. When he reached Marco, he didn't use a gun. He used his bare hands, showing the world why he was the most feared man in the country. When it was over, he found Nia shivering in the corner. He wrapped his coat around her and carried her out into the sunlight, swearing that he would never let her go again. After the betrayal, Dante cleared out everyone he didn't trust, which was almost everyone. He and Nia moved to a villa by the ocean, far away from the city. For a few months it felt like a dream. They walked on the beach, and Dante started learning how to live without looking over his shoulder. He bought Nia the clinic she always wanted, and she spent her days helping the local villagers. It seemed like the Mafia life was behind them, but the past has a way of catching up. Mrs. Moretti's health began to fade again, not from illness, but from old age. She called Nia to her side and gave her a heavy gold key. She told Nia that there was a vault in the city that contained the truth about the Moretti family. She warned Nia not to tell Dante until she was gone. Nia was torn between her loyalty to the man she loved and the secret of the woman who had become like a mother to her. She hid the key in her jewelry box, praying she would never have to use it. One evening, a man from Nia's past showed up at the villa. It was her brother Marcus, who she hadn't seen in 10 years. He was in deep trouble with a gambling debt and had tracked her down to ask for money. Dante was suspicious immediately, but Nia begged him to help her brother. Dante gave Marcus the money, but he warned him that if he ever brought trouble to their door, there would be consequences. Nia felt caught between her blood family and the man she had chosen. Marcus was a weak man, and he told the wrong people where Nia was living. Within days, the villa was surrounded by a new group of enemies who wanted Dante's head. Dante realized that there was no such thing as retiring from his life. He told Nia that the only way to be safe was to take over everything and become so powerful that no one would ever dare to look at them again. Nia was horrified. She didn't want him to be a king. She wanted him to be a husband. The argument lasted all night. Nia told him she couldn't stay if he went back to the violence. Dante told her he couldn't let her leave because she was his heart. It was a stalemate of love and fear. The next morning, Nia woke up to find Dante gone. He had left a note saying he was going to finish the war once and for all. He took his best soldiers and headed back to the city, leaving Nia in a house full of guards but an empty bed. Nia decided she couldn't sit and wait. She took the gold key Mrs. Moretti had given her and drove to the city herself. She found the vault in an old bank. Inside wasn't money or gold. It was a stack of ledgers and recordings. They proved that the rivals were actually being funded by the police and local politicians to keep the gangs fighting each other. It was a setup to keep the city in chaos. Nia realized she held the power to end the war without firing a single bullet. She drove straight to the middle of the battlefield, a warehouse where Dante was about to start a shootout. She ran into the middle of the clearing, holding the ledgers high. She screamed for them to stop, telling them they were all being played like puppets. The men on both sides lowered their guns, confused. Dante ran to her, trying to pull her to safety, but she stood her ground. She showed the leaders the evidence, and for the first time in history, the enemies realized they were on the same side. The revelation caused the corrupt officials to flee the city, and the gang war ended in a strange, uneasy peace. Dante was seen as a hero by the streets for exposing the truth. He used the opportunity to turn his illegal businesses into a legitimate corporation. He still had power, but now he used it to build schools and hospitals. Nia stood by his side, finally seeing the man she knew he could be. They were the most powerful couple in the state, but they lived a quiet life. 1 year later, Dante took Nia back to the place where they first met. He had completely renovated his mother's old house, filling it with flowers and sunlight. He led her to the garden and dropped to one knee. He didn't offer her a diamond ring. He offered her a simple gold band that had belonged to his grandmother. He told her that she had saved his life in more ways than one. He asked her to be his wife, not as a mafia boss, but as a man who loved her more than life. Nia said yes, and the wedding was the biggest event the city had ever seen. Even the people who used to be Dante's enemies came to show respect. Mrs. Moretti sat in the front row, crying tears of joy as she watched her son marry the woman who had brought her back from the dead. It was a day of healing for everyone. But as they were dancing their first dance, Nia noticed a man in a dark coat watching them from the gate. She felt a chill, but Dante squeezed her hand, reminding her he was there. The man at the gate was a journalist who had been following Dante's story. He approached them later and asked Nia how she felt about being married to a man with such a dark past. Nia looked at Dante, then back at the journalist. She said that everyone has a past, but only a few people are brave enough to build a future. She told him that love isn't about finding someone perfect. It's about finding someone who will fight for you even when the whole world is against you. That night, as they sat on their balcony overlooking the city, Dante confessed one last secret. He told Nia that the first night he saw her with his mother, he had already decided to change his life. He said he knew that a woman like her would never stay with a man like he was, so he had to become someone better. Nia realized then that her love hadn't just changed him, it had given him a reason to survive. They watched the sun come up over a city that was finally at peace. However, the story wasn't quite over. As Nia was cleaning out Mrs. Moretti's old room to turn it into a nursery, she found a hidden compartment in the floorboards. Inside was a photograph of her own father, standing next to Dante's father 30 years ago. They were wearing the same uniforms. Nia realized that their families had been connected long before she was ever born. Her father hadn't died in an accident. He had died protecting Dante's family. It was a circle that had finally been closed. Nia kept the photo but never told Dante. She realized that some secrets are better left in the past to protect the beauty of the present. She walked out into the garden where Dante was playing with their new puppy, and she felt a sense of complete peace. She had walked into the lion's den and walked out with the lion's heart. She knew that whatever challenges came their way, they would face them together. Their love was the strongest weapon they had, and it was finally enough.